All right, so you ready for this? What if, like, all the startups in the world decided to team up?
Like a one giant mega startup.
Yeah. We're looking at the Giga Startup Hive mind, and it gets pretty wild.
I can imagine. We're talking about like reshaping how innovation works completely.
Exactly. So is this the ultimate dream team or a corporate nightmare? I mean, the source talks about combining all these resources, right?
Right. And all that brain power focused on the same goal.
So it's like saying, forget small steps. Let's solve the big problems.
That's the idea. Things like building a Dyson sphere or reversing climate change, it argues those become more attainable with everyone working together.
Okay, I get the appeal, but there's got to be a downside, right?
Well, the source argues that competition is kind of crucial for progress.
You mean like when you have to beat someone, you work harder?
Yeah, exactly. That competition drives innovation, risk-taking. In a hive mind, it argues, there's this risk of getting complacent.
So instead of pushing boundaries, it becomes about maintaining things.
Right, and it questions whether a mega startup could adapt to changes quickly.
And honestly, managing a company that big sounds like chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Think about integrating all those different companies, different cultures, global teams.
Scheduling meetings would be a nightmare.
And the source really highlights that, the potential for bureaucracy to just bog everything down.
And then there's this issue of power concentration, which the source also brings up.
That's a big one. It gets into like who controls this thing, how decisions are made, and how they impact everybody.
Because if this one company basically controls the economy, that's a scary amount of power.
Exactly. And the source questions whether that serves humanity's best interests, delving into the potential for manipulation and censorship and even loss of freedom.
So it's this weird paradox. It could solve existential threats, but also create new problems.
Exactly. It explores this tension between collective action and individual liberty.
It makes you wonder if there's a middle ground, a way to collaborate without losing those benefits of competition and individual expression.
Well, the source does offer some alternatives to this mega startup model.
Okay, like what? What are some of those other approaches?
Well, one idea is forming alliances. So startups keep their independence, but work together on specific projects.
So teaming up, but not merging completely.
Exactly. Like a network of specialists contributing to a shared challenge, allowing for more flexibility.
Kind of like assembling a team of superheroes instead of one all-powerful being.
Yeah. And the source points out that this could lead to a more dynamic and innovative environment.
But could a network like that really handle huge projects, like on the scale of a Dyson sphere?
That's where public-private partnerships come in, which the source also suggests. Governments could play a role, providing resources and a framework for those large-scale projects.
So it becomes this collaborative ecosystem of startups, governments, research institutions.
Right, and it argues this approach could balance collective action with individual liberties and market dynamics.
It's definitely a less monolithic model than the mega startup, that's for sure.
It is, and the source really dives into these alternatives, suggesting that a more nuanced approach might be the key to achieving those really ambitious goals.
All right, so we've talked about the pros and cons of the mega startup, but this source also looks at the impact on everyday life, and that's where it gets really interesting for me.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. We're not just talking about economic models, we're talking about how we work, how society functions, even our individual identities.
So let's start with the workplace. What's it like to work for this mega startup, according to the source?
Well, it raises questions about job security, about career paths, even what work itself means, Imagine if everyone essentially worked for the same entity.
It makes you wonder, would you even choose to work for them? Or would it be an obligation?
Exactly. And the source gets into those dilemmas, exploring the psychological and social implications.
Yeah, the mental health aspect is huge. Imagine the pressure of working for a company that's responsible for, like, the entire planet.
Right. The source touches on that, the potential for conformity, groupthink, suppressing dissent.
Because if everyone's working towards the same goal, does individual expression even exist?
That's a big concern. It looks at the potential loss of diversity in thought and action, which could actually hurt progress.
So it's this unsettling possibility it could solve problems, but also create a society where everyone thinks the same way.
It's a classic dilemma, right? The source really pushes us to consider the trade-offs between collective efficiency and individual liberty. Like, are grand goals worth sacrificing personal freedoms?
And what about inequality? The source brings that up too.
Absolutely. It asks whether the benefits would be shared fairly or if it would make existing disparities worse.
Like, would a small elite control everything and everyone else is just a worker bee?
That's a crucial question, and the source argues that any system with this much power has to be designed carefully to prevent abuse and make sure things are fair.
It's a lot to unpack. The mega startup could be transformative, but it comes with all these ethical and social implications.
It's a multifaceted issue for sure, and the source really doesn't shy away from the potential downsides, encouraging us to think critically about these radical changes to our systems.
So we've looked at the arguments for and against this mega startup and how it could impact us personally and as a society. But this source doesn't just leave us hanging, does it?
No, it doesn't. It actually offers some potential solutions, even if we completely reject the mega startup idea.
Okay, so if that's not the answer, what are the alternatives? What does it suggest?
One compelling alternative is open innovation models, where solutions are crowdsourced from a global community of innovators and researchers, even everyday people.
So tapping into the collective intelligence of the planet, regardless of who you work for.
Exactly. It highlights platforms and initiatives that encourage open collaboration, knowledge sharing, open source technology.
Breaking down those silos and working together as a global community. I like that.
It's a powerful idea. And the source argues that this could be a more inclusive and democratic way to accelerate innovation compared to traditional corporations.
But wouldn't it lack the focus of a centralized entity like the mega startup?
That's a valid point. But proponents of open innovation say that the sheer volume of ideas and diverse perspectives can make up for that lack of central control.
It's like saying the best solutions can come from unexpected places.
Exactly. And the source has plenty of examples of open source projects and collaborations that have been incredibly successful.
Okay, that's one alternative. What else does the source suggest?
It also talks about decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. They operate on blockchain technology.
DAOs, right. I've heard the term, but I'm still not quite sure how they work.
Think of it like a digital cooperative. People contribute resources and then vote on how those resources are used.
So decisions are made collectively, not by some CEO.
Right. And it all happens transparently through smart contracts recorded on the blockchain.
Kind of like a company run by an algorithm, but with real people voting.
That's a simplified way to look at it, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's a system where people collaborate and make decisions without those traditional hierarchies.
It's a pretty radical concept. Are there any real-world examples of DAOs actually working?
One interesting example is the Constitution DAO, which tried to purchase an original copy of the U.S. Constitution at auction.
Wait, they wanted to buy the Constitution using a DAO?
Yeah, they didn't win, but it showed how DAOs can mobilize resources for ambitious goals.
That's amazing. So DAOs are capable of more than just, like, buying historical documents.
Definitely. People are using them for all sorts of things, funding research, developing new tech, supporting social causes. It's still early, but it has the potential to change how we think about funding and governance.
It's definitely worth paying attention to. So we've got open innovation and DAOs. Anything else?
The source also talks about citizen science, which is all about getting everyday people involved in scientific research.
So instead of just reading about discoveries, you can actually participate in making them.
Exactly. And you don't need to be a scientist. There are projects for all ages and skill levels.
I like that. So what are some of the citizen science projects that the people can get involved with?
There's Zooniverse. It has tons of projects that need help with things like classifying images or analyzing data.
So I could help astronomers find new galaxies. That's pretty cool.
You could, or track bird migration, search for planets. There's so much variety.
What about projects that are more, like, local in my community?
You could check out eBird, a database where bird watchers all over the world record their sightings.
So my bird watching could actually help scientists study bird populations and things like that.
Absolutely. And SysStarter is a great resource for finding local projects like monitoring water quality or tracking invasive species.
It's amazing to think about all these citizen scientists contributing to our understanding of the world.
It really is. And it's not just about data collection. Citizen science is about education, community building, empowering people to take part in shaping the future.
So instead of relying solely on experts, we're giving communities the tools to do their own scientific exploration.
Exactly. And with the internet and mobile technology, people have access to more information and resources than ever before. Citizen science is a way to use that for good.
All right, so open innovation, DAOs, citizen science. Are there any other models the source explores?
It also talks about improving collaboration between existing institutions, universities, research labs, government agencies.
So not just creating new things, but making the current systems work better together,
Right. It argues that breaking down those silos could lead to much more impactful research and development.
like sharing resources and expertise instead of everyone working in isolation.
Exactly. And it gives examples like CERN, the particle physics lab in Europe, where scientists from all over the world work together.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to collaboration. It depends on the context.
That's a key takeaway. The source emphasizes that it's about finding the right mix of structures, incentives, cultural norms.
Like we're building a toolkit for collaboration, with different tools for different situations.
I love that analogy. And the source encourages us to be creative and experimental, to try new things and learn from both our successes and failures.
So it's not just about choosing between a mega startup or something else. It's about exploring all these possibilities and finding what works best.
Exactly. And the source reminds us that collaboration isn't just about being efficient. It's about shared purpose, connecting with people who share our values, contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
It's about using our collective intelligence and creativity to build a better future for everyone.
And that's a vision that I think we can all get behind. It does, doesn't it? Like, we're at this point where tech is advancing so fast, but we also have to figure out how to use it responsibly.
Yeah, like we're picking a path for the future, and the mega startup is one option could be efficient but also risky.
Right, and like we've talked about, the source makes us think about the downsides of all that power in one place, monopolies, censorship, losing individual freedom.
Those are huge issues, right? It's not just about building amazing tech, it's about what kind of society we end up with.
Exactly, and that's why these alternative models are so interesting, because they offer ways to achieve big things without sacrificing things like diversity and individual choice.
So let's look at those alternatives more closely. We talked about open innovation, where solutions come from a global community. What are some real examples of that working?
Well, one big one is the Linux operating system. It's a perfect example of how tons of developers from all over can work together to create really complex software, and they do it without a traditional company structure.
So it's like Wikipedia for code. People contribute their skills to build something bigger than any one person could.
That's a great analogy, and Linux shows that open source projects can not only work, but they can actually be better than commercial software in terms of quality and innovation.
That's pretty impressive. Does open innovation work in other areas besides software?
Definitely. Think about the Human Genome Project, a huge international effort to map the entire human genome. Scientists from all over worked on that, and a lot of the data analysis was actually done by volunteers through a platform called Genome at Home.
So like a global science project where everyone contributes to solving this massive puzzle.
Exactly. And that project had a massive impact on our understanding of genetics and health. It wouldn't have been possible without that collaborative, open approach.
Those are some really cool examples. It shows you what we can achieve when we combine our resources and knowledge, right? But open innovation isn't the only alternative to the mega startup.
Right. We talked about decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs too, remember? Those self-governing entities on the blockchain.
DAOs, right? Remind me how those work again. It's a bit of a mind bender.
Basically, it's like a digital cooperative. Members contribute funds or resources, and then they all vote on how to use them.
So it's not some CEO making all the decisions.
Nope. It's all decided collectively, and it's all transparent, tracked on the blockchain through smart contracts.
So like a company run by an algorithm, but with real people having the power?
Yeah, that's a simplified way to think about it. But it's really about removing those traditional power structures.
It sounds very futuristic. Are there any real-world examples of DAOs doing stuff?
One that got a lot of attention was the Constitution DAO, which tried to buy an original copy of the U.S. Constitution.
Wait, they tried to buy the Constitution using a DAO? Seriously?
Yeah, they didn't win the auction, but it showed how DAOs can bring people together to go after ambitious goals.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So DAOs can do more than just like buy historical artifacts.
Oh, absolutely. People are using them for all kinds of things, funding scientific research, building new technologies, even supporting social causes. It's still early days, but it has the potential to change how we think about organizing and funding projects.
It's definitely something to watch. So we've got open innovation, DAOs. What else did the source talk about?
Citizen science was another big one. It's all about getting regular people involved in scientific research.
I like the sound of that. So instead of just reading about scientific discoveries, you can actually help make them.
Exactly. And you don't need a science degree or anything. There are projects for everyone, no matter your age or background.
Okay, I'm sold. What are some citizen science projects people can join?
There's Zooniverse, a platform with loads of projects that need help. Things like classifying images, analyzing data, tasks that computers aren't great at.
So I could help, like, astronomers identify galaxies in telescope images. That would be awesome.
You could. Or track bird migration patterns, or even look for planets around other stars. There's so much to choose from.
What about projects that are more, like, local? Something I could do in my community.
You could check out eBird. It's a global database where birdwatchers record their sightings. By just logging the birds you see, you're helping scientists study bird populations, migration, and how things like climate change are affecting them.
Wow, so my weekend bird watching could actually contribute to scientific research. That's pretty cool.
It is, and there are tons of other projects focused on local environmental issues. So Starter is a great website to find projects near you, like monitoring water quality or tracking invasive species.
It's amazing to think about the impact all those citizen scientists combined can have.
It really is. And it's not just about collecting data either. Citizen science is also about education, getting people excited about science, building community.
So it's like empowering people to be active participants in science, not just passive observers.
Exactly. And with all the information and technology available today, citizen science is a way to use those tools for good.
Okay, so we've got open innovation, DAOs, citizen science. Anything else the source covered?
The source also talks about improving how existing institutions work together, like universities, research labs, government agencies.
So it's not just about creating new things, but making the current system more collaborative.
Right. The source argues that breaking down the barriers between those institutions could lead to much more effective research and development.
Makes sense. Sharing resources and expertise instead of everyone working in their own little bubbles.
Exactly. And it gives examples of successful collaborations like CERN, the particle physics lab, where scientists from all over the world work together.
So it seems like there's no single best way to collaborate. The best approach depends on the specific situation, right?
That's a really important point. The source emphasizes that it's about finding the right combination of structures, incentives, and cultural norms to create a truly collaborative and innovative environment.
Like having a toolbox full of different collaboration tools and picking the right ones for each job.
I love that analogy. And the source really pushes us to be creative and experimental, to try new things and learn from both successes and failures.
So it's not just about picking team mega startup or team alternatives. It's about exploring all these options and figuring out what works best in each case.
Exactly. And it reminds us that collaboration isn't just about being efficient. It's about having a shared purpose, connecting with people who believe in the same things, working towards something bigger than ourselves.
It's about using our collective intelligence and creativity to build a better future for everyone.
And that's something I think we can all agree on.
Wow, it's like we've gone down this rabbit hole of mega startups and all these different ways to collaborate.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. The source really makes you think about both the good and the bad of each approach.
You know, what struck me is how this goes way beyond just tech and business. It's about how we function as a society.
Oh, absolutely. It's about power, control, resources, what kind of future we're building. Not just if we can build a Dyson sphere, but what happens to people in the process.
And the source doesn't give us easy answers, which I appreciate. It's more like it makes you ask the tough questions.
Right. It's about having a more informed conversation about these really important issues and realizing that there are many different viewpoints and solutions, and each has its pros and cons.
I think the biggest thing for me is we have to think about unintended consequences, right? Just because we can do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
I agree. The source really emphasizes ethical considerations, thinking about the long-term impact of our choices, not just for us, but for future generations.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new tech and big ideas, but we need to be careful and think critically.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to have these open discussions, to hear different opinions and challenge assumptions, weigh the risks and benefits.
It's about responsible innovation, right? Not just doing things because we can, but because it aligns with our values.
Well said. And that kind of innovation needs more than just smarts. It needs wisdom, empathy, the willingness to work with people from different backgrounds.
It's realizing that we're all connected, and the problems we face affect everyone. We need global solutions.
And those solutions are more likely to come from cooperation, not competition.
The source paints this picture of a future where humanity works together to solve big problems, not through one giant company, but through all these interconnected networks and collaborations.
It's a future where innovation isn't just about tech, but about making a better world for everyone, a more fair and sustainable world.
That's a future I want to be a part of. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to contribute too.
I hope so too. After all, we're all shaping the future together.
That's it for our deep dive today, folks. Thanks for listening.